I'm reading John chapter 15, verses 9 through 17. As my Abba has loved me, so I have loved you. Live on in my love, and you will live on in my love if you keep my commandments, just as I live on in Abba God's love and have kept God's commandments. I tell you all this that my joy may be yours and your joy may be complete. This is my commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And you are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer speak of you as subordinates, because a subordinate doesn't know a superior's business. Instead, I call you friends, because I have made known to you everything I have learned from Abba God. It was not you who chose me. It was I who chose you to go forth and bear fruit. Your fruit must endure, so that whatever you ask of Abba God in my name, God will give you. This commandment I give you, that you love one another.
A poem from one of my favorite theologians, Shel Silverstein. It's from Where the Sidewalk Ends. I will not play tug-o-war. I'd rather play at hug-o-war, where everyone hugs instead of tugs, where everyone giggles and rolls on the rug, where everyone kisses and everyone grins, and everyone cuddles and everyone wins. Will you join me in prayer? Love incarnate, you gave us one command, to love one another. Easier said than done. On our journeys we make mistakes. We speak without thinking first or listening. We make assumptions without knowledge. We neglect to show up for one another. We get consumed by having our fair share at the expense of others. Or we just get plain overwhelmed by everything. Fortunately, your inexhaustible, abundant love and grace are always there. May we be reminded to share that which is so freely given to us. May the words from my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts bring comfort to those who seek it and conviction to those who need it. And may these things be pleasing unto you. Amen. It seems appropriate that as we complete our journey of I've been meaning to ask, in what has come to be recognized as the close of the summer season, the traditional last hurrah of Labor Day, replete with barbecues and picnics, putting away our white shoes until Memorial Day. But we often forget that Labor Day is an annual celebration of the social and economic achievements of the American worker, of those who in the past have tended to have less than the others and work harder for what they have. So in our exploration, we have asked the questions that culminate with today's question: how do we demonstrate God's love? Today we heard John 15, 9 through 17. It was Jesus' commandment to his disciples to remain in his love and to love one another as he loved them. Demonstrating God's love in our lives can be done in various ways, and it often involves living out the principles of love, compassion, and selflessness taught by Jesus, the great equalizer. We have myriad ways in which we can follow the path of Jesus, and we can demonstrate God's love. In our showing love for others, we are taught we can show God's love by loving our neighbors, our family, our friends, and even strangers. This involves a kind of kindness, these acts of kindness and empathy and compassion toward others. Sometimes this is more difficult than meets the eye, and more so when we encounter the unlovable, and the further out we get from our family and immediate friends. I mean, I'll admit, I find it really difficult to muster up the word of love for the white Christian nationalist, or who spread this venom and this hate so easily. Or for the MAGA Republican leaders who dispense lies like Pez. Can you imagine that? That's a great visual, isn't it? These narrow-minded followers who say there is no such thing as a gay Christian, yet every day I wake up and I look at myself in the mirror and I go, I'm real. Service and charity. Engaging in acts of service and charity to help those in need is a tangible way that we demonstrate God's love. Some of us volunteer at local shelters. We feed the hungry, or we assist marginalized individuals and communities. The commitment to Life Moves, the MLK Days of Service, raising money for the Ukrainian war orphans in Poland. I mentioned last week that I would offer something you can do from the comfort of your own home, and then I neglected to talk about it. So I'm going to tell you about it right now. And I'll tell you about it again. There's a specific need right now in Foster City in San Mateo County, and it's called English Together. It was developed by a professor from Stanford University who's retired, and the mission is to bring together and create rich connections between ordinary speakers of English, here we are in the room, ordinary speakers of English with low-wage immigrant workers by preparing the volunteers to provide one-on-one coaching experience in the workplace, English in the workplace. So simple words, simple phrases. That's all we're there to do. We're not there to be, oh, it goes like this, or teach them English. We're there to coach them and be able to say simple phrases. You don't have to know Spanish or whatever the language the immigrant speaks. You just have to be a presence with them and say, repeat or parrot how you say it. And Brian and I happened to check out one of the informational sessions, and I'm going to start next Tuesday. So go ahead and ask me after the service about the opportunity. You can do it from your home on Zoom, once a week, easy. Forgiveness. Forgiving others and letting go of grudges. That's an embodiment of God's love. It reflects the forgiveness and grace that God extends to humanity. This can be really hard. We have touched on it lightly in this journey, and we are often told to forgive, but we aren't given the tools of forgiveness, or we're not always clear on what it means to forgive and what forgiveness is or isn't. Our friend Dakota Brown offers a workshop which I took years ago, and again, I see demonstrations of forgiveness. When we were in Selma, Alabama, right at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, there was a 90-year-old man who was there and got beaten as he tried to cross for the voting rights march. He shows the scars on his head, but what does he do? He's there to promulgate love and forgiveness. He forgives the people of that time. I don't know how he arrived at that, with that scar on his head, being beaten on a bridge, but he got there, and he's saying, that's the point. Why carry these grudges and these hurts? Let's move forward from there. Doesn't mean you forget. That's what I want to be clear about. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. And then, I've heard stories of the Holocaust survivors forgiving. And there's this wonderful video I saw from a woman. She talks about her forgiveness. She was called to task by fellow survivors. And she said, that's me who's forgiving. I'm not forgiving everybody for you. That's me. She was the twin. She was actually the piece is called Mengele's Twins. And she and her sister were victims of those surgeries that they would do tests on them to see the different, it's horrible. But she forgives. Mothers of murdered children who forgive the perpetrators, who forgive them and saying, I don't want the death sentence. There's no point in that. And they forgive. I don't know that I can do that. I don't know that I can do that. But I see it happen all the time. Reconciliation. striving for reconciliation in broken relationships and working toward peace and unity among people. Crickets, yeah. How do we reconcile with those who threaten us with civil war in these days? How do we reconcile relationships in our own communities? Are there people who left maybe this community due to a kerfuffle in the past, or maybe some behavior extended toward them? Are there someone in this room right now who need reconciliation and a reset? Advocacy for justice. Standing up for justice and the rights of the marginalized and the oppressed individuals or groups. That's a way to reflect God's concern for the vulnerable and marginalized. And we participate with the NAACP, we received an award for it. What else are we doing? We have donations to the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, Puente, for the workers of the farms over in the coast side, San Mateo Pride, showing that we care about our queer marginalized people. I also attended the Rainbow Kids virtual workshop. There's another one happening on September 7th, and we'll talk about it at the end again. If you have a moment, it's an hour and a half on Zoom, it's a webinar, go to it. It's how do we support the youngins these days in their recognition of their own gender and identity and sex. Now that doesn't mean you're looking them for go out and have sex, whatever. We're talking about how do they visualize themselves, how do they see themselves. We found out that as early as 2 and 3 years old, kids have an identity. They know what they want, and they know what they see, and how they want to see themselves. And I don't know about you, but I know for me, I want to be part of a generation that helps Sydney's generation be more accepted and loved for who they are and not have to struggle with being told that they don't exist or they're having their identities erased. So those are just a couple of things I wanted to share with you. You know what's coming next. Okay, we're not going to break up into groups today, but what I'm going to do, yes, the question will be, how do we demonstrate God's love? Yes?
Breakout rooms?
No breakout rooms. We're going to talk. I'm going to say, so after these last 8 weeks now, hasn't it been, we've been asking these different questions. So we're at the end of this part of the journey. And we're asking the question, how do we demonstrate God's love, knowing what we've known from before? And that's not the microphone I want. And so I'm going to ask, just offer what you've learned or what your thoughts on it are. And I say, take that brave space and raise your hand and offer it up. I'll come over to you. And you can speak it. Ro, hello. Welcome home.
Thank you. I think the best way is to live your own best life to the fullest every day and appreciate what you've been given and try and spread that joy around.
Yes, thank you. I posted this on my own personal Facebook page. There was a Dua Lipa. People are familiar with her. She's like the hot new, singer, and she's in the Barbie movie and everything. And she, everybody loves her dance songs. And she basically rolls it up into a nutshell and says, if you're not happy with yourself, you're not going to make everybody else happy. So a lot of the people is like, how can you love your neighbor if you don't love yourself, right? How can you love someone else if you are so tied up in the hatred of self? Thank you. Come on. I know someone's over there. Catherine.
I was raised in Hartshorn, Oklahoma, and it was the first school to integrate, and we were bused, but my grandparents taught us never to judge a person by the color of their skin. Judge them by the way they treat you. And we were taught to love everyone. And they were lucky, my family, they lived back then as we do today, but it was the situation they were in where their mother died and they were like 6, 7, 8 years old. Their father herded cattle, but the rich people in my city let them work for them. So fast forward from the connections, they had a store account, they had a bank account, they had groceries delivered through their connections. But that's the way we were raised. Judge a person by the way they treat you, not by the color of their skin.
Thank you. And I think it's important that you lift up connections. And in this world today, we get so easily disconnected from one another, right? In the age of Amazon and delivery, and you don't have to step outside your door. And that was one of the hardest things, I think, when we, through our COVID experiences, right? We learned how much we need connection with each other. And we're discovering a lot of the fallout from the experience with the kids and how they're progressing in their schooling and in their social development. For those 3 years or 2 years, it's a big, big difference for them.
Thank you, Reverend Michael. I believe we should just all treat each other the way we want to be treated. And what I try to do is treat people the way I want to be treated, respectfully. And there are people that it doesn't work with, that people just look at me and label me because I'm a woman, because I'm black, because I'm a Democrat. So for those people, there are times that I do pray for them. I pray that they don't have the hardened heart that they have. And it's not my job to make them love me or respect me. That's on them. And when people hurt me, whether physically or emotionally, what I do is I forgive them for myself. I forgive them because as long as you let someone hurt you, you're feeling that hurt. They go on about their lives. They don't care that what they've said or done to you had an effect on you. So what I choose to do is to release that and say, I will no longer let this person hurt me, or what the words that they say hurt me or make me angry, and that helps me. And I also demonstrate God's love by teaching my children and my grandchildren to be respectful of everyone.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, that whole thing about letting someone else take up rent in your head for free, as they say. The other thing about praying for, well, I've had that one a lot. I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray for you. I say, well, thank you. I can use all the prayer I can get. And I'll pray for you as well. And leave it at that. Anyone else have any thoughts? Just be a thought. Nothing? Okay. All right. So we are called to challenge the hierarchies and power dynamics that are taken for granted in this world. We are called to examine our own lives and seek to address the inequalities and injustices in our spheres of influence. And you know what? Each of us has a greater sphere of influence than we give ourselves credit for. So here we are on Labor Day, and it's 2023, and we have an ongoing opportunity to support workers' rights and fair labor practices, which align with the principles of justice and fairness of Jesus' teachings. Unions often play a role in advocating for the workers' rights and their fair wages, and we can be involved in such efforts. I don't know who takes the daily journal, but there's an article on the front page of the weekend section about Julie Lind, who is the Executive Secretary Treasurer of the San Mateo County Central Labor Council. And its simple title of the headline is A Labor of Love for Julie Lind. And it talks about her family's involvement with it. Now, a lot of people will talk about dynasties and all that kind of stuff, but they forget that these people are doing it because they have a love for the people they're serving. And if you're not going to serve the people with love, then get out. One of the things I'm thinking about particularly today is this is now, we've entered into the 4th month of the writers' strike, who have been joined by SAG, the Screen Actors Guild. They are looking for a modern approach to how they get paid. Turns out that they've lost 14% of their wages due to inflation and haven't had upgraded contracts in years. And with the changing face of how film and entertainment is done, the AI and all these other things that come in, and the streaming video, they're not being compensated for that. And I was reading somewhere, and it was actually a Catholic priest who was involved in some show, and he said, I got a residual for something that hit big. My residual was $216. That's all, I'm going to leave it at that. So if there's a way that we can support them as they continue through their fight for their own justice, that's part of our working for justice. When we advocate for workers' rights, gender equality, promote racial reconciliation, or address economic disparities, we are demonstrating God's love. Putting our bodies on the line where we can, however we can, is a demonstration of God's love. When we do these things with humility and servanthood and the value of all individuals, it can serve as a foundation for challenging and transforming oppressive power dynamics. And there are a lot of them out there, and they're going to keep being out there because, you know, everybody wants to have power, I guess. But we as a community can be truth that speaks to power and holds them accountable for who they are. But we also have to hold each other accountable in the room before we can go out and hold others accountable. Our community outreach, particularly to marginalized people, it is a way to follow Jesus' teaching about caring for the least among us. It involves reaching out to those who are disadvantaged or oppressed, offering practical help, like teaching them workplace English, and advocating for a systemic change when necessary, and maybe saying yes in my backyard for affordable housing. I don't know if you've been following the whole kerfuffle up in Millbrae. Now I understand everybody wants a place to live. They want to have their fair housing. They don't want homelessness, but they don't want to have a solution for homelessness, it seems, either. There's this hotel that the county wants to buy and have as transitional, I believe, as transitional housing, is it not? So it's not permanent. They have a whole plan, and people actually came out and were just horrible about it because they don't want them in their backyard. You know, I've got mine, but you can't have yours. There's a problem, but I don't want you to. So we live in a culture that also often prioritizes a narrow definition of family. You know, how are we related? And the emphasis on solidarity and friendships in the John 15 passage invites us to look more broadly about our relationships. The queer community has been doing it for years. When families rejected, they went to the Mecca, San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles, and created their own families of choice. And that's what Jesus did too. He created his own family of choice. And it encourages us to see our faith communities, a family of choice, and our friendships as vital sources of support, love, and connection, extending beyond the traditional family structures. As I said, Jesus went out. Jesus went out and said, hey, follow me. That's how he developed his community and family. And they said, when he said, come follow me, okay. Even though he knew how it would end, they didn't. They didn't know. They said, and and stepped out into the void. How can we do that in our lives? How can we step out? How can we step out? And to do something like that is when he says to lay down your life for a friend. It doesn't mean take a bullet. It means to give up what you think life is in the way that you know it. To maybe look at it differently and alter it. That's laying down what you know to go and step out and do something you don't know. Now, am I saying that's easy? No. But ultimately, we live out our faith through our commitment to our love and our justice and compassion in all the aspects of our lives. From that point, we can start to address the complex social issues and relational issues with intentionality and a faith-inspired action that demonstrates God's love in a world where everybody wins. May it be so. Amen.